Temperature rise will bring widespread devastation and unprecedented extreme weather.
New coronavirus cases emerge across the country.
Obesity rates have more than doubled in kids.
Cape Town is running out of water.
Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I say that on purpose because our guests today for this special session on how your school can win the world's best school prize for innovation are all over the world. And so our two guest speakers today are friends of mine who come from very different parts of the world, but I would like you to consider them experts in this subject. And they are a gentleman called Eric Jameson from Australia and Armand Doucette from Canada. Armand actually has just joined us at the backstage, and I can see him. And you can't get more authentic. He's just finished teaching a class. And so he's joined us to talk to us about, well, what does it mean to be innovative? Now, you'll know that we launched these World's Best School Prizes at the plenary of World Education Week. And the idea is quite simple. We want to celebrate grassroots-based, schools-based expertise. And the prize is a mechanism to make sure that we can surface all this incredible experience and knowledge and make it available to every other school who wants to run with it, who also wants to improve and adopt some of these ideas. And it's a mechanism to capture and disseminate great expertise that comes from schools themselves. And so the prizes ultimately lead to the creation of great professional learning communities and quite a significant public goods agenda that actually allows us to make sure we do good in the world by making sure that the intelligence, the knowledge, the experience of all these fabulous schools is disseminated equitably to those that actually want to go on this improvement journey. So you may ask in terms of, well, what are the prizes and what is it that today's session is about? Well, my friends, it's exactly what it says on the tin, which is today we're talking about the World's Best School Prize for Innovation, which is one of 5 prizes. And so the prizes in order are the World's Best School Prize for Community Collaboration, the World's Best School Prize for Environmental Action, the World's Best School Prize for Innovation, the World's Best School Prize for Supporting Healthy Lives, and the World's Best School Prize for Overcoming Adversity. And for each one of these prizes, we've created these sessions as a way of providing you guidance as to, well, how do I complete the form? What is the process? What is it that you're looking for? And to have a discussion with our friends who are on the review panel for the criteria, the assessment frameworks, who've helped us really think through, well, what should be the standards in these 5 areas. So without further ado, I want to invite Eric to this call. Eric, hi. Welcome. Where you are, it's nearly midnight in Abu Dhabi, but I know you're from Australia. And so welcome to this, and thank you so much for staying up.
Thank you, Vikas. I don't know what time of day it is, but yeah.
Yeah, and we have Armand. Armand is in Canada. I'm liking the green glasses, my friend. And so thank you for joining. And I know that you just finished a lesson for your class. Now, when we look at these prizes, I should tell you that in terms of innovation, there's a lot of well, what is innovation, right? And so I just want to make it clear that we're using a particular definition. It's important to start with that. And the definition actually comes from the Brookings Institute in the US, who've written a report on leapfrogging. And they equate innovation to an idea or technology that is a break from previous practice, often new in a particular context, even if not new to the world. And so when people think about innovation, they think about robots, they think about all this technological stuff that is, AI-driven, data-led. Actually, what we're talking about is maybe in some parts of the world that may be true, but it doesn't necessarily apply to all parts of the world. And so what this idea gives you, is this definition gives you, is that an innovation is that something that is a break from previous practice, and it's often new in your context, even if it's not new to the world. And so I want us all to bear this in mind when we talk about innovation. Now, for the prizes, there's some general criteria before I ask our two guests to actually delve deeper into the specific criteria for this prize. And so the general criteria we're looking at is, can your school demonstrate a commitment to excellence? I mean, the prize is called the world's best school prize. And so you have to make sure that you keep a focus on excellence. And that's quite important. The second general criterion is, has your school developed trailblazing practices, processes, and pedagogy school-wide? This is a really important point that we want you to take note of. The third is, do you have evidence to support your application? Now, it's no good you just thinking that you're the best in the world where you've got nothing to support it. And that may very much be the case that you are the best in the world. But we want to see quantitative and qualitative evidence to support your application. The fourth is, can you demonstrate your impact on the experience and life chances of your students? That is a little bit different to a commitment to excellence. It's different to developing trailblazing practices, processes, and pedagogy school-wide. It's different to providing evidence. This is about demonstrating impact on your learners, on your students. And that's a really important thing. And then the most important, in many respects, the whole purpose of the prize is this: what can other schools learn from you? Because that, I think, is the clincher for me when we came to design these prizes. We want to know, what can other schools learn from you if you get through the prizes, you get shortlisted? What is it that you're sharing? Because that is the purpose. The prize is a mechanic to surface great expertise. So without further ado, I want to bring in Armand, and I know Eric will rejoin us in a second. Maybe his battery died. But if I look at the first criteria, Armand, we talk about homeschool and community engagement. Can you just give everyone here an understanding of what this means?
If I'm looking at homeschool and community engagement, and basically increasing diverse people and places that are involved, we're talking about basically engaging the community and looking at very inclusive and equitable and diverse practices. And for that to happen, we're looking at engaging the community to really innovate and put the student at the center of the learning.
And so, Eric, welcome back. And we were talking about the general criteria, and then the specific criteria related to this prize. Now, I should also mention that in the specific criterion, this can get overwhelming. I understand that from an application form basis. And so, what we've said over here for this prize in particular, there are 4 different criterion. Now, if you're excellent at even just one of them, you can apply for these prizes. You don't have to be able to apply for all 4 or meet all 4 criterion. So if you're good at this, for example, which is homeschool and community engagement, you should apply for these prizes. Now, the second criterion, and Eric, I'm going to call upon your expertise here, is teaching and learning. Tell us about this particular criterion when it comes to the innovation prize.
Yeah, so really interested in what's happening in terms of changing practice, how we're engaging students, how we're preparing students for a rapidly changing world. And really, I think it comes down to that. if we're thinking about, okay, what's required in the world as we, which is shifting quite dramatically and at a much faster pace than what schools are. Schools, and we've had this discussion, because about schools still reflecting, the same sort of practice happened when I went to school many years ago. They still look and feel the same to a large extent, and yet, the world's moved on, and most professions have moved on. And while some practices changed, we haven't reflected, to a large extent, the change in society. So that's really what we're after.
Eric, not wanting to make you homesick, we have Shanti over here saying hello from Australia. And for those that don't know, Shanti
wife, hello.
is Eric's wife. Glad to see you're awake at this time of day, supporting Eric, Shanti. So I was remiss in the first criterion to actually look at this homeschool and community engagement. There's some specific questions that we ask, and I just want to read them out so that everyone understands. So there are 4 bullets. The four guiding questions are: does the school engage and collaborate with all education stakeholders, families, and the greater community to focus on helping students? The second is, does the school have students receiving formative and constructive feedback on their collaboration from multiple sources? And how are these students given chances to grow through this feedback? The third bullet is, does the school have innovative practices, procedures, and or systems that bring the classroom out into the community and the world? And the last one is, does the school have learning that happens not only in the classroom, but in a diversity of contexts, connecting students and classroom to the outside world? Now, on the teaching and learning point that Eric has just spoken about, there are 3 guiding questions. Actually, there are more than 3, but I'll read 3 out, which are: does the school have formative assessment practices, procedures, systems that students self-reflect on their practice, learning, competencies, skills, and work in order to improve? The second is, does the school make student learning collaborative? The third is, do the students actively publish and or prototype to solve community problems? And on it goes. And so when I talk about these 2 criterion, gentlemen, I want to ask you, what schools come to your mind? What are the things that you've seen through your practical application? I mean, Armand, you work in a school at the moment. Can you give us an example of other schools that do this really well?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple schools around the world that I've seen. You can take a look at social emotional learning and the scaffolding to create social emotional learning integrated with the school settings. So it could be to develop resiliency or to answer an issue with the community. You look at Stephen Ritz in New York and what he's doing with the Green Bronx machine in the gardens and answering a key issue that they have. He prototyped gardens and then went and found the technology to be able to do that a lot quicker. And then from there, looking at nutrition, because he had a society that I think it was at 7% that ate at least 1 vegetable a week. And now he's jumped that to, I think it's 6 or 7 vegetables a day. So that to me is kind of prototyping something that can answer a key issue within the community, but also within the school. If you're looking at restorative practices, so they've talked about restorative practices and how to engage accountability measures for students to own their learning, but also own their behaviors. So you have different schools that have kind of implemented that type of practice within the school, which used to be punitive. So these would be like 2 very innovative type processes or systems that you put into play, but that are on different parts of the spectrum. One's very much a pedagogical approach using the curriculum to engage the community on what would be a sustainable development goal for nutrition. And then the other one's very much about learning how to learn and the scaffolding to your resiliency and accountability lifelong.
And so, Eric, I come to you, people equate innovation with technology. Do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, I'd love to. I think, the unfortunate thing is people do see that as an end in itself, and yet, it can only ever be a tool. We're having that discussion here actually in Abu Dhabi at the moment about some really good technology. However, its use can only ever be to enable, top-notch practice in schools. And if we're missing out, teaching and learning is essentially a relational endeavor where the relationships are key. And anyone, invariably you talk to people about their best experiences at school, and it's always based on the relationships, that occur. And it's similar here. Technology can be fantastic. It can add a lot of value, but the heart of the whole thing comes from, the creativity, the courage, the passion, the ambition, and the transformation that people they're trying to achieve. And so they're the things that really drive, what's happening in this practice.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. And so I go to the third criteria now, which is around recognition of learning. The creative forms of recognizing student learning while in school. Armand, in terms of like when I think about this, I think about, for example, from standardized tests on academic subjects to demonstrate mastery of competence on key skills like communication and listening, or from cohort-based to personalized. Can you say a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think Eric really touched on it in terms of, all learning and teaching very much is relational, and it's very much about relationships. So if you're looking at creating creative forms of recognizing student learning, and you go from the basis of those relationship and student-centered, it doesn't necessarily need to be a standardized test. Right now, we talk a lot about triangulation of data, which is conversations, observations, and product. And product could be a test, but could also be, piloting a new play that you create based off the society that you're studying. It could be looking at collaboration skills while answering a key question that they're tackling on science, a different experiment, or creating their own experiment based off what they see as an issue in the society. So when you're looking at the data that you're collecting, especially in terms of assessment on the curriculum, but also in terms of the soft skills or competencies, you're really seeing it from a perspective of trying to look at it from a professional's point of view and bringing your professional judgment to the forefront.
And like, when you think about this particular criterion, there are two guiding questions that we've placed. So the first one being, does a school have innovative alternative assessment practices that students are getting constructive, timely feedback from multiple sources, not only teachers? And the second one being, does the school have the students' work assessed and recognized in different contexts from multiple sources, including teacher, school, leadership, peers, community, parents, NGOs, industry, etc.? Eric, do you have anything to say about this as a former school principal?
No, absolutely. I think, and Armand's picked up on key aspects of that there. I think what's really important is asking the question, does the assessment reflect the purpose of the learning? And if it's not really capturing the purpose of the learning, you're missing the point. And quite often we'll revert to standardized tests or whatever as sort of the ultimate reflection of our progress or whatever. And yet, that might be 3 or 4 or 5 steps away from what we're actually doing. And so if we really want to capture the success, the integrity of whatever the activity is, whatever the experience is for students, it needs to be directly related to that. So one of the things that I've always encouraged is we're really good at identifying criteria which define, a level of success or a hierarchy or whatever of success. We do that even for the most high stakes tests in terms of marking essays, etc. We're really good at actually defining those criteria and applying those criteria to the extent that students can self-evaluate using those criteria. They can do peer assessment using criteria. Their parents can be involved. You can have panel sessions where they're presenting, etc. All of those things are possible, provided that we have the right tools that reflect what it is that we're trying to do.
I think Eric's key there, Vikas, in terms of if you're looking at the self-reflection piece of the student, that's as important as the rest of the assessment that's happening. So tools like Flipgrid in terms of getting self-reflection on what they're going through and what the processes are, and being able to ask a few key questions and getting them to assess that, but then getting multiple, like a 360-degree feedback loop that you would have as an assessment as a manager. and getting that type of feedback on where you're going is key.
Armand, Shanti asked this question. It's unfair to ask Eric because this is probably their bedside conversation. But how do schools balance system and reform constraints with innovation, alternative paradigms, and future-focused learning opportunities? I think you might have written a book on this subject.
Shanti, that's a great question. I'd like to hear Eric's answer on that, actually. I think it's the ultimate paradox, to be honest with you. It's we are now in a system that, especially with the pandemic, that's amplified this question. I think we're at the point now where you need to take a deep look at all these different aspects and see where you want to go and how you want to go forward. And that means engaging the community, engaging the students, engaging the teachers, and looking at what's best for your community, and then taking a look at how your school is structured, systems, processes, procedures, the whole 9 yards. And that's a football term, but basically we're looking at what does this mean and how do we, from the ground up, build it? I know oftentimes I've said built it back better, but the truth is that we want to move away from it and really look at what can we do today to meet and reflect, like Eric said, reflect society's needs at the moment, but also reflect the students' needs, and understanding that there is a lot of scaffolding and base and foundational knowledge that is key that you can't really progress without. Oftentimes we say, well, you can just Google it, but that's not completely true. I don't want a doctor that can just Google it. I want a doctor that knows on their feet that you're having a heart attack, this is what you need, and doesn't need to take 5 minutes to go take a look and then analyze it and so on. So there are some foundational pieces that come into play, and I think we're now kind of navigating all that. And around the world, this is why these school prizes are interesting, is that, and key is that around the world, we're all doing this at the same time. And to be able to share each other's knowledge and to be able to share our practices and see how we can build quicker, I think that's key.
Thank you so much. We come to the last criterion for the Innovation Prize, which is around relevant technology and data. And what we say over here is that technology and data are used to enhance the learning and pedagogical practice for inclusivity and equity with teaching and learning being modified or redefined. Evidence and data are used to transform the learning experience and improve programs, procedures, and pedagogy. Eric, do you want to talk about this as a former school leader yourself?
Yeah, obviously the technology opens up so many opportunities for us in terms of big data and small, and having a look at the potential with artificial intelligence and drawing pieces of information together to give us insights about the learning process, about students' progress, etc., is enormous. And that's on the horizon. I think that will come into play a lot more richly in the future. At the moment, there's still a lot of data that we can collect, and it can really inform what we're doing, how we go about doing that. That's in anything that we do. We want to be able to collect evidence to be able to reflect the progress that we're making and the progress that students are making, and technology is a great way into that.
So there are 4 guiding questions that really play to this criterion. The first being, does the school utilize technology to redefine or augment the teaching and learning? Does the school utilize technology and data to help the student enhance their self-reflection and learning? Does the school deploy technology to help improve back office efficiencies, collect metadata, and streamline communication inside schools with the parents and the community? And fourth, does the school leverage technology to engage the students and communities? Armand, I'm going to come to you on this in terms of, can you give actual examples from your knowledge from schools around the world that actually how this particular criterion is applied?
Well, I do know that there's some schools that use their student cards to come in and come out. So when you're looking at insurance purposes and fire bells and that kind of thing, that really helps in terms of being able to track who's in the building, who's not, right? Now, there's some ethical issues to that, but that's something that's being used. Self-reflection, if you're looking at websites like Whimsical, which is a concept mapping tool that you can collaborate from different areas around the world. I do know that there are some larger projects between schools that they use Whimsical to create kind of their base knowledge of a different subject, and then from there, what do they want to prototype to answer a key question in their community? It's a great way to showcase your learning or demonstrate your learning while at the same time collaborating on a key document together, like Google Docs. But with Whimsical, it's a bit different, where you can actually map out, you can add pictures, you can add quotes, you can add all sorts of things. And for somebody that's prototyping something or using the design thinking approach, it's a key kind of platform to be able to use. You're looking at, we mentioned Flipgrid for self-reflection. So Flipgrid is basically a video platform that is used through teams to be able to self-reflect or produce or demonstrate your learning in a different way. So that's something where you can build community, and you can come in and you can talk to each other, and then from there be able to self-assess or assess others and ask key questions to keep growing their learning. So that's something else. Teams has been used, I do know, in other learning management systems to create a one-stop shop in terms of all the assignments, being able to track that, when's it turned in, all those key things, and engaging parents in terms of, this is where your child's at, here are the assignments of the day, and being able to help them out from that point of view. And I mean, there's numerous other ways that technology can enhance, particularly when it comes to demonstrating their learning and personalizing it. And as Eric said, with AI and some of the learning tools that are coming into play, it's really about how does that enhance the pedagogical practice in play, and then how does it help in terms of the sequencing of the learning for the child and the reflection of that learning.
Eric, there's a question that's often asked of these kinds of initiatives, in that, is there a bias for schools from the rich world? And how do you address that?
Well, there probably is, but
when you think about what I was getting at is, again, that this is not necessarily about technological innovation by itself. You see so many examples of great pedagogical innovation. When you think about all these schools in far-flung corners of the world, in particular in rural schools, that they're not necessarily in the rich world. You want to speak about that a bit?
Yeah. So in terms of the prize, absolutely. In terms of access to technology, AI, et cetera, yeah, there probably is a little bit of a bias. But in terms of what we're trying to do here, absolutely not. In fact, you know what? I think some of the very, very best innovations and initiatives and catalysts for change that I have seen have been from the most basic sort of ideas, where people have had a challenge and look to confront that challenge, address, create much better practice, much better processes, which bring about equity and inclusivity just by their very nature, and don't even go anywhere near technology. So I think the ways to be able to engage with this, which will be looked on, incredibly favorably, it goes back to where I mentioned earlier about courage, belief, purpose, passion. If you can bring that through your application, as schools do that, that would be mightily impressive.
And so this prize is open to every kind of school under the sky. And so we've not said they're just for private schools, or they're just for international schools, or they're just for religious schools, or NGO schools, or state-run schools. What we are trying to say is that school expertise, talent exists everywhere. And so if you're a school, even in the most challenging circumstances, I can more or less tell you that you have some sort of expertise that you should come forward and share. And so Armand and I often have this discussion about, for example, private schools. And the question that I always get is, well, the private schools always win. Armand, have you changed your mind on this?
In terms of?
Well, is the winner of this prize a private school?
No, not necessarily. I think public
education. Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because I really do think that innovation comes from everywhere. It's like, Eric, we talked about, I've talked about AI and I talked about different types of technology, but the number one technology that was used during the pandemic in education was actually television and radio. because we do have a lot of countries that have rural settings, and to be able to reach those rural settings without the technology or the Wi-Fi, self-care packages that you're working at your own pace, a bit like Vicky Colbert's work at Escuela Nueva in Colombia, and then it spread out in Latin America and in a lot of rural areas across the world. It happened in Canada in the 60s and 70s and still does today in some of our rural areas. When you're looking at self-paced packaging and being able to have a checklist and then explore that, and then getting maybe your key knowledge through radio, or if you're looking at cell phone use, there was WhatsApp groups created for school culture because they weren't together, especially in the younger grades with elementary. So they would create a video call or a chatting group so that they can communicate and still stay in touch with their peers and stay in touch with their community. So engaging in that situation. So when it comes to innovation, I really do think innovation can come from anywhere. And I completely agree with Eric. It's really about that passion and trying to resolve a key issue. And by resolving that key issue, you've innovated in some way, shape, or form.
So there's this great definition in addition to the one from the Brookings Institute, which is most of the literature defines innovation as the implementation, not just of new ideas, knowledge, and practices, but also of improved ideas, knowledge, and practices. Mm-hmm. And so we should bear this in mind. This is not something that's cutting edge and just new that's been invented where you are. This could be an improvement of what is happening in your local context. And it's very important to say this. In the definition of innovation, we're not talking about cutting edge robots necessarily. We are also talking about other things which are new to your context or an improvement in your context, doing things differently. And this represents a leapfrog opportunity is how we like to talk about it. And so in terms of general advice to everyone, in terms of these prizes, Armand, what do you have to say about the application process and the form and everything? Do you have any general advice, given that you have applied for other prizes in the past? Experience.
So, I mean, the first thing is always head to the website and click on apply now. And then from there, in this situation, there's a subscription to get the application package. And the application package, you have forms, you have a framework, you have judging criterias, and then you have the application guiding document. I would personally start with reading the application guiding document. And no matter if you will or will not apply for one of these 5 school prizes, I think the key for this prize for the schools and for the community and for the teachers and everybody involved is very much undertaking that self-assessment process based off that guiding document. I mean, many countries already have this type of self-assessment process, so it can go hand in hand with it. But then what you want to do is then prepare the questions before you go on and actually complete the forms, because you can't save and you can't push continue. So really what you want to do is go through the whole self-assessment process, do it as a team, self-reflect on your practice, self-reflect on in your classroom, self-reflect on kind of what's going on within the school, what's going on within the community context that's helping that learning, and then answer those key questions. I think that's how I would go about it. And knowing some friends that have gone through these types of things in the past, that's usually the way you go, is you go through the application guiding document, look at the judging criteria, self-reflect on your practice, and then realize what you could or could not put in.
Eric, what is the prize in terms of for a school to actually go through this process?
What is the prize?
Yeah, what is the prize in terms of why? What's the motivation?
I think it really feeds, building on what Armand just said, it really feeds, belief and confidence and acknowledgement, celebration of the things that are going on within your school. So just going through the process alone is a really invaluable thing. I think it's an acknowledgement. A principal applies for this, for instance, pulls the staff together to say, really proud of the things that we're doing here, really excited about the things that we're doing. And I really want to acknowledge that by, going through this process. As people work to pull that together, it really is them, I guess, staking a claim for the difference that they're making in their community. And that sends great messages out to the whole community.
You forget one of the most important things, Eric. They also get to win $50,000 for their school.
Of course.
And what does that mean to a school? When you win $50,000, Eric? What do they do with it?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It just gives you money which is not attached to any other condition other than go forth and make a difference. And, that's a gift because that doesn't often happen. Usually there's lots of conditions to any sort of money that comes in.
Fantastic. And so here are some, you should head over to worldsbestschool.org. You can follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Our hashtag is Strong Schools, and you'll find all this information to use and for your benefit on our website. So please do head over there. I will say one thing in the application process, given that we've designed it in a particular way, which is if you're asked in a particular question that we ask, say, for example, 200 words as a minimum, I suggest you give 200 words as a minimum. If you give us, this is quite a large sum of money that we're giving out. And if we ask for, the guidance is 200 words and you give us 100 words, it doesn't really show much commitment or understanding of what we're asking for. We want as much information as possible that actually helps us arrive at a decision. And so if you're a school and you're watching this, when you're going through the form, there's some really great tips that have been given. So Armand spoke about bring your school team together, your leadership team, apply and reflect firstly on what's being asked for, and then construct the answers together. And so it becomes stronger as an application form for you. Remember, the deadline is until the 1st of March, so you still have a few months. And so if you invest the time and the effort and the resources and the thinking power, I'm sure you can put in a really good application form. Now, if in the first year we've said that we're only doing this in English, and so if you are not an English speaker, you should actually find someone who can help you complete this form. And so you can be an Arabic speaker. And if you can't find someone to help you with that, contact us. We may know people who will help you with the translation of your form to help you write it. Don't let that be an impediment. And so make sure you think about these very subtle things that are required to actually get you over the threshold and actually be successful in this process. So the thing I'll say is that all the shortlisted schools, there'll be 50 schools in the community, 10 per category. You all join a community. And the idea behind the power of the community is exactly that. It's very powerful. We can learn from that. And we want to take your expertise and actually disseminate it to the rest of the world. That is the real prize. Yes, the money is there, and yes, it's meant to do good, but that shouldn't be the only motivation here. But yes, we understand that it's appealing. And so, as Eric said, the prize is the acknowledgement, the celebration of you and your colleagues and your students, and the expertise you've built, and your contribution to the wider world. So that's how I want all of us to think about this. Friends, I don't think there's much more to be said today for the World's Best School Prize for Innovation. The next such live stream that we have is on the subject of supporting healthy lives, I believe, or overcoming adversity. We've got 2 more left, and I hope you'll join us. On that final note, Armand, thank you so much for joining us today. Eric, thank you also very much for joining us. It's very late where you are, and I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you all, and we look forward to your participation in the prizes. Take care, and please do apply. Press the button, as Armand said. These things do not happen by themselves. You have to be proactive. Be the change, as you say. Goodbye and good night.